Thank you for listening to the Three Bros Podcast. This episode, we discuss a law that went into effect in January 2020 to reduce the amount of people in jail during the trial process. This law limited cash bail in New York State. Did it work? We try our best to figure it out. Let us know what you think on our temporary home at Twitter, at Party Unified. And again, thanks for listening. We are on.
We are on. God bless. Three Bros Podcast.
Seconds to silence? Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, do we do that?
No, you're good.
No, let's give it 10 seconds. Moment of silence.
No, go ahead.
Welcome back to the Three Bros Podcast.
Thank you for being here.
I'm sorry? Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. Because there are plenty of you. Just at the edge of your seat. So NBC News, I posted an article in the past week or so, and I living in New York State and being around the mixed bag of politically minded people I've heard varying degrees of things about this law that New York has passed, and I was like, okay, well, I kind of have my gut instinct reaction to hearing about this law, and I actually know nothing about what it actually does or how it's been going or what it is, whatever, you know. And you hear plenty of things about people who are right or left, and you can almost always tell they're just shooting from the hip. Like, it's like somebody that reads a headline and immediately they feel like they know how they should respond to the article without actually reading the article, right? So I thought, okay, let's look at this. Let's take an honest look at it. And let's just see what it is. So we're talking about ending cash bail in New York State. And as far as I'm aware, California has done something similar, although I didn't really look at how that's panned out. I was more focused on how it's panned out for New York State. So this is an NBC News
and
article.
I'll share when we get there, but go ahead.
Oh, interesting. Okay. But this is an NBC News article, and the article title is Fair or Dangerous? Days after ending cash bail, New York has second thoughts, which obviously is begging the question a little bit. And the tagline below that is, bail reform is well-meaning, but there are unintended consequences. So obviously when you hear, like, ending cash bail, you're like, okay, that's ridiculous.
Are you?
Are we talking about well, yeah, because if you're just saying ending all cash bail, are we talking about murder suspects? Are we talking about...
Okay,
and obviously that's obviously not the case. So let's just, as far as I understand it, what the New York State bail reform did was it eliminated cash bail for most misdemeanors and non-violent felony charges. When it came to more serious charges, it allowed the judge to make a determination into what that bail should be. And as far as I understand this bill, it got passed last year, and then it got amended in April to give a little bit more jurisdiction to judges as to whether or not cash bail should be enacted. Now, the intention of this is, it's obviously not symmetrical. So if you have somebody who's a millionaire who is caught drunk driving, a cash bail is set for that individual. And if you have somebody who is a working class person who is caught drunk driving, a cash bail is set for that person. That cash bail is, generally speaking, as far as I understand, usually similar. And the person that's working class wouldn't be able to bail out, whereas somebody who is well off would be able to. But the other thing is, what happens is if you have somebody who is working class, let's say, they are given a bail that they cannot afford, so they have to wait in jail until their trial takes place. Now, notoriously, we have some clogged court systems in the United States, so it might take a while for you to get to your trial date, and all the while, your rent keeps piling up, your job has probably let you go, your bills keep piling up. And you could be innocent, right? Like, you are innocent until proven guilty. So the argument there is, we're disproportionately affecting poor people who tend not to be able to bail out, and like totally derailing their life, and there's a good chance they could be innocent, or that their trial takes place and the judge finds that the offense wasn't as serious, or, you know, whatever, what have you. So that's the idea of the law. And my question to you guys is, now, for me, like, just straight from the gut, the first time I heard this, I was like, well, that's a bad idea. That was my instant reaction. I don't know how you guys...
Did you think that was a blanket end cash bail? Is that why you thought it was a bad idea?
I didn't, because I assumed that, like, okay, obviously murder suspects are not going to be just, like, let back out.
So you still thought it was a bad idea, even though you knew it was, like, kind of non-violent?
Yeah, I'll be honest about that. Like, just gut reaction, like, that doesn't make sense.
Why? For non-violent offenses.
Okay, well, let's say that somebody goes and robs a bank. Sure. They get caught, they get processed, they get a trial date set, they get released. What's stopping them from going back and just knocking over another bank? Or what's stopping them from fleeing to another state? Or you know what I mean? Like, my gut reaction is, why...
So,
yeah, go ahead.
Is the bank robbery a part of this?
Go ahead.
So my question is kind of similar to Cyril's, but let's talk about the purpose of the reform, and that was it was disproportionately affecting lower economic status people, poorer people, right? Rich people probably aren't going to knock a bank over, so can we use this example in a different context, like drunk driving?
Okay, yeah. Drunk driving is more of a universal crime, I would say, I guess.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I feel like that's a very important thing to put in there because
I agree with you.
You know, people who can afford bail aren't knocking banks over. That's not, you know, although written into the law, there's the potential to have no bail on something like robbing a bank. Although I don't think there is, because that would be first degree burglary or something of that.
Yeah, it's a high felony.
Sure. That's a pretty serious thing. So let's do the drunk driving. Let's do something that would be, you know, without economic status. Like, no matter what, everybody does this.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess, as far as I understand, the bigger concern there is if you have somebody that's working class, they don't have, like, a safety net to lean back on, you know? One of the things that Bernie always said on his campaign trail in 2016 was, you know, 60% of Americans are paycheck to paycheck. If you genuinely are innocent of the crime that you're being accused of, or even if you're guilty of the crime you're being accused of, you hold that person up in jail for even like a month or two, you've totally derailed that person's life. Like, they're fucked, to be perfectly frank. You miss you miss a month or two of work, you're done. You're fired. You've got to pay rent, you've got, you know, bills that are piling up. I mean, it makes sense from that perspective. So forget about the whole disparity thing. Just think about even the person that's working paycheck to paycheck. Even if they're, let's say they were driving on a suspended license, you know, and they're in jail, they can't bail out. You are totally you're not eliminating. You are derailing that person's capacity to get their life back on track. If they were to somehow beat the charge, or if they were innocent of the charge, they're fucked. You know, they come out and they're totally derailed. That's not reforming people. And that was another thing that I had in my notes is in the United States, what do we focus on? Do we just focus on punishment, or do we focus on reform? But I guess that's a whole nother point of the conversation.
But it's good context for this.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, go ahead.
The important thing here to keep in context for me is the letter or the spirit of the law, right? This is to give a fair chance to people who don't have the ability to just bail out. I mean, you can see a world where some CEO drinks and drives, but he has not only the funds to get out of jail, but he also has the funds to hire an Uber or hire a driver or take a taxi to work. Like, he or she can still maintain their profession, their work life, their personal life to some degree, whereas someone who doesn't have the ability to do that, although both are guilty of the crime, what is the difference between a CEO who makes $1 million a year that can post bail and his secretary who makes $40K a year and cannot post bail? The question is, and I think the spirit of the law tried to address the disparity there, because that's certainly unfair. Just because you have more money than somebody else doesn't mean you are less guilty or more privileged than another human being. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that was kind of the spirit of the law. But
Yeah, I agree with that.
what actually occurred, and what I think was the problem with this, is that it did not give judges a more reasonable latitude to make that decision, to identify somebody who is a lower. What they said is you cannot do this no matter what, right? So the judges weren't allowed to really be able to look at past offenses, look at different potential factors to argue that, hey, maybe this person needs to be locked up for society's sake, as opposed
they
to
mentioned
just making it more fair because they don't make as much money. And I feel like that's where this kind of misses the mark. Go ahead.
They
Sarah.
mentioned in the article that people who were proponents of the law, Cuomo, de Blasio, leader of the state Senate, have said it needs to be changed. And they did mention that there are some ways that they're seeing, like hate crimes, that we probably should hold them because of their views and opinions. It's more likely, apparently, for them to go out. Like, one of the examples in the article was like someone's anti-Semitic and they like attacked 3 Jewish people. Then they couldn't hold them on bail and went out and attacked another Jewish woman. So they did say that, like, all right, well, we need to be more specific like this. We need to carve out a better way of doing this.
But what people will say is they didn't identify that until after we did, until after
Are we
we
going
put this in place.
to hold that against them?
People like de Blasio and Cuomo?
Yeah, I mean, is anybody perfect?
Politics.
Are you gonna?
Well, that's what I was.
Are you gonna roll out a perfect? Go ahead, Chad. Sorry.
That's what I was gonna say, because what I get frustrated at is because, like, okay, now that I've read a little bit more about it, I totally understand the merits to this argument. Yeah. But when you have somebody who opposes this, to grab as much attention and drive as many voters as they can, they're gonna say things like, "Oh, murderers are let out onto the streets, rapists are let out onto the streets." It detracts from having an honest conversation towards a middle ground that is perfectly reasonable and that most people would probably agree with outside of this weird realm of politics that we're in right now. That's what kills me about this. Because, and, you know, Cyril and I are people who tend to delve into the comment sections and keep our fingers on the pulse when you're talking about, like, Breitbart, or you're talking about, you know what I mean? And
one of my favorite places.
How do you stay sane?
Let's not name places, sorry.
Keep please on the inside of your booty hole. I don't know how you guys stay sane.
Difficult to answer, but keep going, Chad.
My butthole's puckered so tight it could turn coal into a diamond.
Oh my god!
While I'm reading these comments, I'm just gonna be honest with you. But when I see when I see the responses to a proposed bill like this, it's so over the top. It's so egregious because the way it's being framed to just drive that traffic and to like motivate people to vote is in this do or die drastic, like this is the degradation of society type of way. It's so disingenuous.
If I may real quick, I'll let you keep going, Chad. There's a paragraph in the article that says, for every story that gets sensationalized, there are hundreds of people who have been able to keep their jobs and remain with their families while accused of low-level crimes.
So this is my critique of the Democratic Party, more specifically, is because you're right, Chad and Cyril. When you have the other side of the opposition, I believe in this case it's more Republican-minded folks that tout these one-off situations, although terrible and should be addressed appropriately, do not make the sum all of the law a terrible thing.
Correct.
And this is where, to me, those folks fail. The folks, specifically the Democrats that are in power, the ones that were advocating for this law, the people who are pushing that direction, they don't do a good job of telling those stories to their constituents, still saying, hey, this is a good idea. We should make some changes, but this is still good.
This kind of goes back a little bit to what Cyril and I were talking about, though, because yes, you're kind of right, but we also, across the political spectrum, we do not subscribe to the same kind of media anymore. So whereas, like, let's say a CNN will have Cuomo up for 4 minutes explaining the merits of the law, Fox News will have a 10-second clip that takes something out of context that justifies their claim to rapists are being let out onto the streets. That I think.
And Newsmax get with the times.
There is definitely a problem with marketing I would say, at least as far as Democratic causes in popular media today. But there's also a problem with the channel or the way that media filters its way down to people consuming it. And it's so fractured that, like, we don't even agree on what reality is anymore. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's a weird time.
Yeah, but I don't think that removes the argument altogether. Like, I get what you're saying, but to me, they're not even starting to even tell those stories for it to even be distributed.
I'm sure you could find some clip where Cuomo's on CNN or MSNBC just having a conversation about this law in probably pretty reasonable terms. I'm sure that's out there, but the people...
But they don't connect it to people.
Well...
They don't sit here and say, here's what happened to this individual, and thank goodness this
I
is
see
here.
what you're saying.
This can happen to you.
Sure. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Nobody's
right.
making that connection.
Democrats...
Republicans, right, in this case, are saying, hey, these people are letting murderers and rapists out.
Right.
They're going to come after you and your children.
Democrats suck at marketing their few good ideas, and Republicans are really good at demonizing those very same ideas. You know what I mean?
So ultimately, when it comes to this bail reform, I think that the spirit of the law was appropriate, but the implementation of the law was an issue, and specifically not allowing the judges more latitude to make that decision was where this thing failed.
I agree, but the other thing I'd like to listen, because Cyril said he looked at what California did, because I will be honest, I looked at a lot of the logical sort of discussion, but I didn't look at any statistics or any sort of numbers that described how the law played out. I'm curious, Cyril, if that was...
Yeah, I'll start with saying it's very interesting to know what California is. We all know what California is. It's pretty blue, right? It's pretty... I hate labels. It's a pretty certain type of way, right? Like, we all know. And in fact, in an 11-point victory, they soundly rejected on November 3rd.
They did?
Yes, they did. The California people soundly rejected the kind of the same measure that California had passed, like New York. And when I was reading this article...
Wait a minute. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You're saying California rejected a similar law?
California's legislator and governor created a law, passed it. Opposition people got it on the ballot because California is pretty cool, and I'll give them props for this, that you can kind of have a popular vote on things. That's great. So they got enough signatures to get it on the ballot, and they rejected it on November 3rd.
Oh.
No. There's no popular reform measure in New York at all.
There should be.
Nope.
Bear with me.
Should be.
Let me do some homework. I'm pretty sure.
I don't think I've ever voted on a referendum in every election that I've voted in.
I will say this about what Caleb said. Maybe there is, but it's not as much as California or Michigan or even South Dakota will. South Dakota just legalized marijuana only because of popular ballot reform. Their leaders would never do that. Yeah.
Well, I will say you always hear conversations in California about like vote Prop 27 or vote Prop.
Yeah, so they
know what I mean.
Great job with that stuff. Yeah,
I've never once
put that on the ballot. Right.
Yeah, every time I filled out a ballot, I've never seen a referendum on it. Not once in New York State.
Yeah. You can be a Democrat in New York State and still understand that the Democratic Party
sucks.
Does things just like the Republican parties and other places that have power to keep power.
Right. Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah. So
stagnant power
again,
corrupts.
With the context of what we know the state to be, they rejected this. And from reading the article, the person who was the co-chair who got interviewed for this article was so honest that he was like, I don't know how we won by 11 points. He was like, I didn't think we were going to lose, but I thought it was going to be close, and we won by 11 points. That's not nothing in politics. 11 points is a large victory.
It's a good especially we're so evenly divided in this country.
Sure.
So just hopping in here, there are ballot propositions that happen absolutely in New York State. There was some
probably harder
last one, but it seems to be more localized to county level.
Okay.
At a municipality level as opposed to a state level. But I'm pretty sure in 2016, 2018, there were some propositions for New Yorkers to vote on.
Well, why isn't weed legal then? I concede.
Good point.
Hasn't made it to a proposition yet, apparently.
What I was trying to say earlier is I'm sure New York, I'm sure every state has some form of it, but other states it's easier to get on the ballot. There's not as many hurdles, right? So it seems like California has always been the kind of place there's not a lot of hurdles for that. You get the signatures, it gets to be on the ballot. And I don't think it's no small amount of signatures either. And that makes sense because they won by 11 points. So yeah, they rejected it. So
that is very interesting.
Yeah.
My curiosity here though is I don't care about who's saying what before the law takes place. To me, it's more important how that law actually plays out, practically speaking, in society. Absolutely. What are the actual implications of the law? Because, like, you can convince me, huh?
And if you don't adjust, if you're the person that wrote a law and you see adverse effects and you don't adjust, you're scum.
Right. No, I agree. Well, again, like New York passed this, and then it looked like they reformed it a little bit in April, a few months after. It seems to me that like the most important thing here should just be how does it play out practically. I don't you could persuade me one way or the other, but to me, passing the law and then seeing what the actual implications are is more important. This is why, like, I don't grind too much. For me, I think it's almost better if we had 8 years of one side, 8 years of the other side, and give them more control to, like, actually pass things. Because then we could at least see what the practical implications of your past legislation is, rather than just, like, gridlock. Gridlock does nothing. I'd rather see things flesh out and us collect info on it, rather than completely be gridlocked the entire time. But I don't know. I don't. Does anyone have numbers on this? I couldn't really find any sort of metrics on this. It's a very new law, to be fair.
I think a lot of this comes back to trust.
Sorry, go ahead, Cyril.
Yeah, just really quick. I think a lot of this comes back to trust in our judicial system. Because when I was reading about this and researching it for a little bit earlier, a lot of people didn't like the idea of judges making decisions because they didn't trust the system. And I think at the end of the day, the best answer is, and it might not even, it's not my utopic answer. I have another answer in utopia. Of course, I think we all do. But no, I think in reality, you have to trust your judicial system. Like you just kind of have to. Because, even though this paragraph says there's hundreds of people that get another chance on life who might maybe end up innocent for every one that kind of goes out and does dumb things, that still could be. I feel like in a way, if you trust the judicial system and you have good judges, that still can be a thing in that scenario, because a judge can say, I don't know, it's tough. Like, I'm trying to say, a judge could say, okay, well, you're not as much of a risk as the next person, even though you committed maybe the same crime. Even, like, I don't know. It's hard. It's really hard. Obviously, nothing's ever going to be perfect, too. I'm reminded of that. Nothing's ever going to be perfect, but you should always keep trying. And it's just difficult to have some sort of magic wand that isn't a human being making that decision that would just always work. That's not how that goes. So, and kind of tying this to current events right now, everybody was all worried about the 3 justices that Trump appointed and what they might do here in these election rulings, but they're all just telling Trump to basically fuck off. So I guess anecdotally in that scenario, there was some worry and it ended up maybe not being as bad as maybe we thought. But yeah, you kind of have to, I just can't help but think you have to trust the judicial system. I don't know what else to say. I just don't like the idea that, like, okay, we're not going to have any sort of input in this. We're just going to say no cash bail. Like, I just don't know.
So as far as numbers are concerned, I tried to do a little bit of research and landed on this YouTube channel called All Things Lawyer, who reacts to the New York failed bail reform law. We went from having a 20,000 inmate population to a 15,000 inmate population because, again, you're not holding people for a certain amount of time for arraignment to get tried in court, which was a big deal. Obviously, if you're supporting the life of 5,000 less people, you, in theory, would save some money.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah,
Sure.
it's true. It's a good point.
So that was one thing that she had pointed out as far as advocate. As far as people, critics of it, this is coming from the New York City government site from NYPD citywide crime statistics from February 2020. In the first 58 days of 2020, 482 individuals who had already been arrested for committing a serious felony crime such as robbery or burglary were rearrested for committing an additional 846 crimes. 35% or 299 were arrested in the 7 major crime categories: murder, rape, robbery, felony assault, burglary, grand larceny, and grand larceny auto. That's nearly triple the amount of those crimes committed in the same 58 days in 2019. So that's one kind of hit there. And then they continue on, if I may. The key highlights from that month, which is this is now July 2020, where she's getting this notes from. Again, www.nyc.gov. Go to NYPD crime citywide.
Appreciate you finding this.
Yeah. Murder is up 30%. 235 versus 181 for the first 7 months of 2020 when compared to the first 7 months of 2019. 244 citywide shooting incidents in July 2020 compared to 88 in July 2019.
Well, is that because of the law, though?
Increase. What's that?
Is that because of the law, though, or is that
I'm
just like
pointing, you asked for a number.
Sure.
No, I do appreciate that.
Yeah. What was
good context?
Burglary increased 31% in July and is up 45% year to date for July 31. And for the month of July, rape was decreased by -6%, but they do add right in there, rape continues to be an underreported crime. If you've been a victim of
that's
sexual
not
assault,
wrong.
please come forward. They put in the New York Police Department Special Victims Division, their hotline. So obviously,
here's the thing that does.
Hold on. Year to date through August 28th, citywide hate crimes declined 29%. Now, here's the problem with all these stats. Correlation does not mean right.
Right.
So you don't know if because of this cash bail reform system caused the increase of.
There's a lot more people at home this year because of COVID, right? Who knows?
The stats that I just gave you, I feel like for me, in the case that she was trying to make, are kind of irrelevant. What's more relevant is pointing out that in the first 58 days of 2020, 482 individuals who had already been arrested and let out.
That's hard fact.
Recommitted crime, and that's 35% of them were for one of the 7 major crime categories.
Go ahead, Chad.
I feel like you can point to that and say, okay, something's wrong.
That's definitely a problem, and I was going to bring up COVID, Ciro.
Yeah,
it's definitely not a normal year. So it's hard to compare 2020 to 2019. But what I will say is, so let's take a judge, okay? Somebody's committed a burglary, and, you set some sort of trial date, and you let them go. They commit another burglary, they get caught, they come back. Surely that judge is setting a bail that time, right? Like, if you are given this sort of leeway on the first charge, like, okay, we're trying this new thing, come back on your trial date, and then you commit that same crime and you get caught, surely the judge would look at that and be like, okay, well, you don't get to get out again. Like, you fucked up. You're a moron, right?
I believe in the first provision of the bill that was not the case, as long as it still met the criteria for
that's a mistake.
The original crime. And that's what I'm pointing out, right?
Right.
Is that not giving the judge the latitude to say, no,
right.
You did this shit already. You don't get a second chance, right? They didn't allow that to occur, and I think that is ultimately the biggest screw up. And to Ciro, you were talking about California, right? I think what happened was exactly what we were talking about before. When you can make it sound like murderers and rapists are being let out every day in New York, people are like, nah, I don't want anything to do with that shit.
Yeah.
And that's what I feel like happened mostly in California. I could be wrong, but
it wouldn't be.
Misinformation always hurt people, right? Go ahead, Chad.
To be fair, I'm pretty sure in both states it explicitly did not make exceptions for murderers and rapists.
No, it didn't. But
no.
What Caleb's saying is that's what was being sold. That's what was being sold.
Oh, sure.
Spinning that.
Sure. Yes.
Well, misinformation hurts everybody, right?
It sure does. It sure does. We need the rule of law. Even if you're lying to me about what's actually happening. But well, because it was interesting because you mentioned how shootings were up, Caleb, in New York, and I was like, well, I'm pretty sure again, explicitly to the law, if you were accused of like shooting or committing a shooting, that is a violent crime. You would not get out on no bail. So that's probably more a consequence of COVID than it is of this.
So
Maybe.
there were some other provisions in the law that made me cringe, according to Alton's lawyer, right? So I am not a legal expert, so fucking take what you will from it.
I will.
She had started talking about more specifically that there were other provisions in the law that people really did not like. For example, if somebody who came and burglarized your home was caught, went to jail, they had the right to go back to the scene of the crime to collect their own evidence, like take photographs. People were pissed about that because you're re-victimizing the victim. So if I broke into your home, I get arrested under the law originally. Apparently, I had the right to go back to your home, me, myself, the person who committed the crime against you, or allegedly, to go take photos of your home so that I could prove my case in court.
Well, allegedly is the bit of the trip up there, right? Because obviously somebody who, I mean, if you didn't commit the crime, you might want to try and gather evidence of your innocence, surely, right? I mean,
but if the person who you victimized is very convinced that you committed a crime,
sure,
I don't know that they want you back on their property.
Well, there was another thing in the bill where it said you only had 15 days, I think, or so before, like, for discovery period, and discovery is when lawyers will gather their evidence and sort of like figure out the case that they're going to make. And I believe there was also in the law that opposing lawyers had to share evidence with each other so that everybody there's a shorter time frame, and they had to share evidence. And
now, to connect this full circle to what you were talking about as far as shootings and violent crime, well, I think what she had alluded to, and I could just be taking this out of context, but I'm kind of getting the same feeling, is that the assumption is if I commit a crime against you or you accuse me of a crime, I go to jail, I get arrested. If I have the information that you are going to be a witness 30 days ahead of the actual trial itself, when typically it would be pretty close to the trial so that, you know, people couldn't find out, I could then either myself, because mind you, I'm out on no cash bail, or one of my compadres could come threaten you. Or
well, not if it's a shooting crime.
Right, but we're talking about, I'm just saying, like burglary, for example. Second-degree burglary, you could get out on.
Yeah. Yes.
I could come and threaten you, therefore potentially escalating the crime that I may commit against somebody out in public.
Right, because they have to share.
Against this reform.
Yeah, I'm not saying that's not valid. I mean, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? But
that is so correct.
it's tough because there's definitely a legitimate argument being made on both sides. Like if you have some, well, and that's fine. Let's say that let's not include burglary then. I'd be fine with that. Let's talk about drunk driving and petty thievery, like somebody shoplifts. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm sure there's a finer line we could draw here that I'd be much more happy with rather than somebody who commits like...
Kind of circles back to discretion like we talked about, though.
Correct. Yep. That's where...
Right, and it's up to the state to draw that line to where the judges can have a better informed idea of, you know, what the line is.
To me, I think that the appropriate answer there, and this is just me speaking, is that it's to the judge's discretion, because judges know judges. They talk to each other. They have opinions. They have, right? They discuss how they're dealing with certain situations. It would be appropriate, in my opinion, for them to speak amongst themselves about how they're handling, how they're handling different instances, right? So generally speaking, you're going to land in kind of a similar area. I'm sure there's going to be outliers once in a while, but my point is that if you give more discretion to the judges, you're going to get closer, I think, to a correct answer. And what you also do by doing that, in my very humble opinion, is that because judges are also voted into office in a lot of situations, right? You can then, as a constituency, say, hey, this judge does a really shitty job if it comes out that he just throws everybody in jail, right? You can vote that person out potentially in the future. I could be completely wrong about that, but
no, I hear you. And I would definitely agree with you. I would trust a lot more judges on individual cases making that determination rather than the state setting this hard line where it's like, well, this crime is and this crime isn't, however it gets categorized. It's like, well, a judge is going to know a lot more about the nuances of the crime committed, and they're probably going to have a better idea of who the defendant is rather than the state just drawing this weird hard line. So I agree with you. Like, draw a hard line, but then give judges the discretion to make a decision one way or the other. Because
to me, what I would say is that the other mistake here is that a felony. If you're accused of a felony, I think that might be cause to say.
Yeah, I believe that's on. I think that's listed as
not in the original one. In the original, there were certain felonies that you could not be held for. So there's two bills, right? There's the first one that was officially enacted in January 2020. And then there was the reform to the reform, which I think came in August or September, where they changed some of the rules saying, okay, this isn't working. We got to change it a little bit.
Right, but that's how it should be.
Right, but it depends on which version you're looking at.
Well, ideally the one that they've reformed twice, because I would hope they're getting closer to the best possible inaction of this law. That is, I mean, that's the hope, obviously.
Right, but when you play politics, that's a dangerous.
Sure.
Right, for politicians, that's a dangerous game to play. You can't guess and choose, and we'll figure it out at some point.
No, well,
it's a quick way to find yourself jobless.
This is why we need to incorporate people who are experts more seamlessly into the legislative process, or even, right? Don't clutch your pearls here. Let's put those experts into said office. Oh my God, wild!
Where are my pearls?
Wild. Let's put well-intentioned, smart economists in charge of the Federal Reserve. Insane.
Who's well-intentioned, Chad? That's subjective.
First and foremost, I take offense to you saying I should clutch my pearls. I'm poor. I do not have pearls. So
well, whatever. You're fake bullshit that you bought from the dollar store.
Pearls.
I get really tired because you can definitely see the merits of a bill like this, and then you see how the conversation takes place, and it turns into more of like this binary yes or no type question, rather than like, oh, well, some of it's right, and then like, here's where we need to fix it. Maybe this is where we got to adjust it. That's not the conversation that takes place. People are bored of that conversation.
Why? Because power.
Well,
because I don't think people are bored. People don't have time for this shit.
Or they want to see the world in black and white because it's easier to see the world in black and white.
We all have to shut up. Well, somebody has to talk first, Chad.
I'm sorry. I'm just saying people want to see the world in black and white. It's easier to see the world in black and white than to like navigate this weird moral minefield where you kind of have to figure out what is and isn't correct. But I get what you're saying. Like, people don't have time for this shit. But Caleb, the people that don't have time for this shit, they tend to not engage with it.
Sure.
Well, they vote.
They do vote. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And this kind of goes back to your guys is like, if you're not informed, I don't want you to vote, which I disagree with. Go ahead, Caleb.
That was the best 3 I've ever heard in my fucking life.
Quick fact check.
Yeah.
I believe there were 4 yeses.
Yeah. We get it. It's frustrating, but at the end of the day, I hope that as we continue to have these type of conversations, that maybe somebody will take a few minutes to listen and maybe get a bit more of a nuanced perspective. And the fact of the matter is that we don't have all the time in the world to do all the research. I don't have all of the data.
No, but
we need somebody else to pull some data.
But we legitimately try to figure out how to thread a needle. And I don't care if people don't like us saying that. Go fuck yourself. But we legitimately try. So, like we've said a bunch of times already today about this, it's like, okay, Caleb mentioned it was well-intentioned. Chad mentioned it came from a place that made sense. I agree with stuff like that. But we also don't agree with the whole thing. And that's the nuance that
I'm bored.
We hope people consume and... But yeah, that's the nuance we hope people consume and listen to. But like Chad said, people are really addicted to black and white. It makes it really easy for them. And I don't think that people just live on their teams in the modern time. I think people always have. And misinformation is so that, Chad's right. Like, it makes it so easy for you to just live in these channels where, like, okay, what's my team on bail reform? fuck it, that's where I'm at, and it's tough on both sides, on all sides. I don't want to say both, but yeah.
Yeah, because I would rather somebody be nuanced and be part of the discussion. Because if you're not, I'd rather you not be part of the discussion. I'm not gonna lie, but
correct. Angry Cyril before the podcast. You're not wrong. Should not be part of the discussion. So I take your point. And you're right. I truly do wish there was more. Not even people who we deem as smart or this or that. Just people who are open-minded and who can listen. If you're open-minded and you can listen, and you listen to everything, and you still sit where you were in the beginning, that's fine. Mm-hmm. At least you did that. Mm-hmm. It doesn't feel like that happens.
Bro, I fill my days with media that I chronically disagree with. I listen to more media that I aggressively disagree with than I do media that I agree with. Huh?
I wonder who does more, me or you, because I do a lot, and you're making it sound like you do a lot too.
Now that I'm back at the machine shop, my ears are available all day, so it's been pouring in, man. I've just been consumed. Actually, to take a break because I've been going just way too overboard, I've been listening to only audiobooks this week, just to like let my mind relax a bit, because it's just Jesus Christ.
But I do appreciate you saying that, because you're just one of the rare people in my life, at least, and I try to do the same thing, that really does challenge your beliefs, but doesn't like, there's a lot of people I know that have tried to challenge their beliefs, and they started changing their mind in weird ways. I don't think you really ever have. I think you just let it influence you, and you take it all in, and you say, okay, well, what makes sense here? Mm-hmm. So I appreciate that, and I try to do the same thing.
You gotta, man. You have to.
You have to in this misinformation minefield. You sure do.
You do.
And I don't even blame a lot of human beings for not even being able to navigate it, because evolutionarily, it's tough. It's really tough.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that both of you guys do that so aggressively, because for me, I don't listen to either side. I spend more time fucking looking at Star Wars and there's stupid YouTube videos.
There's a benefit to that too, man.
Podcasts. And what's interesting to me is that with Caleb versus Self and with this podcast, what I try to do is I try to, like Ryan says, be a political atheist, so that my mind is as clean as possible. When one of us says, hey, let's talk about this topic, I then pull some articles from both sides at that point, and I literally compare them side by side.
Right.
And for me, I feel like that has been a much more refreshing way to go about talking or having these discussions.
Well, I was going to say, because Cyril, you and I go balls deep on all of it, but especially the stuff
on
that
the
we disagree
Mark Dice
with. Oh God, the Mark Dice.
Go ahead.
No names. Shame on you.
Sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, we go balls deep on all of this stuff, including the stuff that we oppose. Caleb tends to just stay out of the fray, and like all three of us tend to still end in the same reasonable mindset. But Caleb is way less stressed than us, so it feels like we're doing it wrong. Feels like we're doing it wrong, man.
I think to your point, at the end of the day, we all end up in the same place because we all do listen. But yeah, I think we all take, even me and you, Chad, I think if you looked deep into what we consume and what we do, we all take different steps to get there. I think that's, in a way, that's super respectful. So,
well, we were raised to be reasonable people.
I just think that's what...
Okay, go ahead.
Well, that's fair. Well, he's not wrong. He's not wrong. But Caleb, almost as a response to what that was, we became reasonable in a weird way. But also...
Yeah, that's true.
As
go
ahead.
Well,
I was going to say, as I came of age, Dad also shifted the way that I shifted, and it was interesting.
So, to be clear, right, what you guys are doing right now is what I did about 3-4 years back, especially after Newtown. Borderline, I was invited to a militia. I mean, like, lots of things happened, right?
Sure.
I feel like through all of my experiences, I'm 2 years older than Cyril, 5-6 years older than Chad, something like that. I feel like you guys have another year. Cyril, you've got another year or two before you start like being like, okay, I know what I'm about. I'm just going to engage when I need to engage. Chad, unfortunately, you got a few more years, my guy, of being balls deep and all this.
I'm going to join a militia. I hadn't gotten around to saying that yet, but I am joining a militia.
On that, what do you? So, from your perspective, is that why you're saying this? Did you have some sort of like, I don't want to say awakening. I'm not trying to, but like, did you have some sort of like, all right, I'm done with this crap. I'm just who I am, and I'm, do you know what I'm getting at? I don't.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I had kids. You ain't got time for
Lord, that's a fair point.
Yeah, that's more than a fair point.
Diapers, I'm doing formula. I mean, I'm not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
Jesus, but I still have one that's, I mean, they each have their own idiosyncrasies that are very difficult to deal with. When you're trying to raise kids, it's beyond a 24/7 job. It takes a ton of work, and I think that took away. And that's why at this point, I'm so sympathetic to people not being engaged as much as maybe you two are. I appreciate YouTube because you guys give me a ton of information all the time that I get to be like, oh, interesting, and then move on with my life because one of my kids just ran into a fucking wall. Like, I don't have time to be as deep as you guys. So what I appreciate about having these discussions is being able to be essentially disengaged from the political spectrum as much as possible, which is very difficult to do. I'm not even on social media, but, CNN is on the TV sometimes. Somebody will tell you about a news article or a news thing. You're still going to hear about stuff. Don't get me wrong. But what I appreciate is that when you guys are like, hey, I want to talk about X, I carve out 1 hour, maybe an hour and a half if I'm lucky, where I sit down and I watch a couple YouTube videos, I grab a couple news articles, and I sit down and I spend, although it's not a lot of time, it's hypersensitive to what I'm trying to consume in that moment. And to me, that's been a more efficient way to come to certain conclusions for me. And what I respect and what I appreciate from you guys is that I might land on a certain aspect and you guys will point at something that's like, well, have you considered this? And I might not have gone far enough. Or at the other hand, sometimes you guys are so deep into a particular topic because I have more of a glancing blow and I sat down and really tried to drive to the point of whatever the argument is, as opposed to a lot of the semantics that you guys get into, because just by consuming that content, I feel like sometimes I can cut straight to the heart of an argument and say, well, here, look at this. And that is an appropriate discussion as opposed to a lot of the rhetoric you guys might hear.
That's a great point. Yeah, honestly.
That is a great point. Yeah.
Because when you get so deep in it, sometimes you just lose sight. There's so much white noise. There's so much so much going on that you can't take something out of context and just consider it for what it is. You're entrenched into the whole conversation, which isn't fair sometimes.
It's interesting that Caleb said all that because I've always kind of known that. And I think we can start wrapping up this pod, but here at the end, I'll say I've always thought that it would be a pretty, like if we got pretty legitimate, it'd be good. And Chad may disagree with this. Maybe even Caleb does. It would be good to have Caleb take a lot of leads on like everything because of exactly what you just said.
No, that's fair. That's totally fair.
Yeah.
I'm compromised, bro. I am totally compromised.
I would say, I mean, I still have my preconceived notions. I meant
lead on the podcast, but sorry, Caleb, go ahead.
No, it's fine. When you say take a lead, it sounds like you have this idea that maybe I can be a bit more of a neutral party. Unfortunately, that's still not true though, because I still have my preconceived notions. I still have my biases.
More than us.
Right, exactly. A lot more than I would say the average person.
Correct.
Especially because you're disconnected from social media and you don't necessarily stay as much in the fray as Cyril and I do.
Me and Chad read Breitbart comments. Please take the lead.
please take the lead.
I don't know how you guys navigate.
It's difficult.
My brain is leaking out of my ear canal. Please take the lead because I just can't.
So here's my question to you before we wrap it up, and we'll wrap it up in just a minute here. But do you guys ever dive into the comments of like, I don't know, like Mother Earth or The Intercept or like any more left-leaning
Mother Jones?
Jones. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, but it's so.
I'm asking. Hold on. I'm asking a question. Yeah. Do you do that?
I'll go first. Yes.
Okay.
And I will say that I do it less than the opposing view because I am hungry for the challenge. I don't give a shit if you agree with me. Like, get out of here. Like, I know where I'm standing. And it's, I don't want to make it sound like I agree with Mother Jones a lot. Please, no. But I don't want to delve into comments where I kind of already know where they're coming from. What's the point? I want to see what other people are seeing. And I can only say the reason why is this, because I have a thirst for understanding other perspectives. I always have, and I always will. I'm not like, I already know my perspective. If you have my perspective, that's nice. But like, so what? Like, I kind of already know where you're coming from. Like, I thirst for that other viewpoint. And I will tell you, not all the time do I read another viewpoint and just like write it off. Absolutely not. There's a lot of times where I'm just like, whoa, that's a good point. Like there's somewhere in between here that might make sense. So we'll hear what Chad thinks.
Well, that's the ideal. I mean, a lot of the times I look at stuff, I mean, and this is a bit of an aside, but the fastest way that I got away from religion when I was still a believer was because I stumbled across the Atheist Experience on YouTube. And I was like, okay, well, I know these guys are bullshit and they're probably working on behalf of the devil, but let's see what's up, you know? Because like,
oh, hey.
And it was
fascinating.
The fastest way. I mean, it's like, so there's a straw man argument, right? And there's something called the Iron Man argument, where you take what you believe, you look at the opposing view, and you take the strongest arguments that they have, and you see how they fare up against what it is that you believe. Which is what that's what everybody should be doing. But to answer your question, Caleb, I didn't actually always used to, like, I've always been just a lurker in the comments just to feel the pulse. But I will say I used to do that a lot more on leftist media than I did on right media, because, and I sent you guys a few videos this morning.
You live more in right media than I do? Sounds like it.
What'd you say?
You live more in the right media comments than I do? It sounds like it.
These days, but not usually. These days, only because something fascinating is happening right now with the Republican Party, and it's like a bad car accident. You can't look away. But for me, honestly, like, because I identify more with, generally speaking, more with left ideas, to me, I want to see where the drudgery and where the dumb fucking people are on the left, because those are the people that I want to be able to weed out. Those are the people I want to be able to have a discussion with, and I'm like, listen, you're the reason why we're losing the culture war. You need to shut the fuck up, because I just want people to have healthcare. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I know.
So
you see those memes where the face is there and it's like, healthcare, please.
yeah. There was a meme I saw after Biden won where it was like some child in Lebanon, and there was this drone strike missile coming in, but on the side of it, it was like Black Lives Matter, like LGBTQ. And it's like, that's exactly what you get, because Biden will pander to your... He'll pander to your cultural war on the left, and he'll say, okay, yeah, let's get our diversity in the cabinet. But he's still bombing, Yemeni children. That, to me, that's the bigger problem. So...
We give a lot of arms to Saudi Arabia, and they don't like Yemen. That is correct.
Right. But if we slapped Black Lives Matter on it, Biden would be like, look at the progress I've made.
Look how progressive I am.
Jesus. The most progressive since FDR. Fuck you.
You can't use the Trump voice for Biden. You need to work on that.
Oh, there's...
All right. That's all right.
But we're at the end of the podcast. I appreciate everybody that has made it this far.
Thank you.
At the end of the day, go fuck yourself, Chad. Go fuck yourself, Cyril.
Wow. I love you too,
Yo,
brother.
we should end that always like that. All right, yeah.
Good. At the end of the day, go fuck yourself.
That's great.
Thank you again for listening to the Three Bros Podcast. Again, tell us what you think at our temporary home on Twitter at Party Unified.